So welcome Year 11 to this week's assembly, where we can give some further detail now that we have the outcomes of the joint DFE and Ofqual consultation, and particularly what grading arrangements we will have in place and what it will look like for you during the rest of this academic year. So first of all, thank you for continuing to work remotely and all of the efforts that you've made. I know that's a difficult thing to keep motivated, keep yourself going. You've done amazing, and we're really proud of you for your levels of engagement and resilience during that time. And particularly more recently during assessment cycle 1, where we know there were a few bumps in the road, to say the very least, but you've worked through those, and we're now looking at that work and marking that work, and I'll be able to give some information about how that will be used as part of this process. So thank you, keep going. It's really important that you work hard this week, and then as you return next week, we continue to work and improve throughout the rest of this academic year. So we do have the outcomes of those, and I'll go through some of those shortly. The consultation, we'll talk about grading arrangements, what it looks like for you back in school, with assessment cycles 2 and 3 to come, a leaving date, and then finally results day in August. So I've put down 1 or 2 points from the consultation. Really high numbers of people responded to that consultation, over 100,000 people, and just over half, around 53%, were students themselves. So their voice was really clear there, and would be picked up by Ofqual and the Department for Education. And that student voice was really very much overwhelmingly saying, don't replace exams with other terminal exams. So to make us sit all of those exams at the end and everything to be based on that is unfair and against what we've already been told about no exams. So that kept coming through loud and clear through all of the responses. The exam boards themselves were asked whether they would produce these new exams, and they were reluctant in some ways to produce those and have everything based on that, for lots of reasons, but mostly because grade boundaries and so on are only produced once exams have been sat. So although they could produce new materials and give us indicative kind of areas for grading, until they've been used, it's difficult to do that. They're also saying that the only way that they're any more valid than any other materials that we're using would be if you sat them to an exam timetable, and that they were only released on the day of that timetable, which in essence means exams. And we go back to the earlier point, students, saying don't replace exams with exams. So if you like, the consultation, we must be really, nothing is fair. We've said that throughout, but this does seem to be the fairest option, because it does give us lots of flexibility to be able to make adjustments and be able to make sure that students are not penalised and are not disadvantaged, particularly by the disruption that you have all faced. So teachers should be able to use a broad range of evidence, and that can include trial assessments like cycle 1, like the things that we've already done, any non-examined assessments or what we might have called coursework, NEA work that can be used, and any other work that would demonstrate your ability and meet the criteria laid out by that particular course, then that can also be used as part of our broad evidence base of how you're working. And that can be from your time whilst you've been learning remotely, or before, when you were with us before Christmas, even from in year 10. And students should only be assessed on work they've covered. And the obvious thing is that it's just said, but also that there's an expectation, therefore, that maybe there will be some adjustments to the amount of content that can be covered, and that we might see some small modification where subject areas say we're going to do this, we will cover everything, but maybe not with the depth and the detail that we would do. So therefore we may not assess that. We may cover it briefly but not assess it. There may be other parts of courses, very small amounts we're expected, that may not be covered similarly in that level of detail. that we'll get more information from the exam boards, and also we can now start subject teachers to make some of those small changes. So our response and we start with our key principles. We want to ensure the very best outcomes are reached by our students using the full range within that guidance that we're allowed to use, in order to not disadvantage anyone as a result of the disruption that they faced in learning. To ensure that the process is fair and equitable for all individuals, including providing access arrangements, as we did in cycle 1, and we'll continue to do that for all of those identified with any SEND need. To mirror as closely as possible the weightings for NEA versus other assessments. So you've picked particular courses because you felt you would be successful with that particular assessment model, maybe 50% being NEA in some subjects, 50% being through examination. And so we want to be able to replicate that, so that again you feel that you've got that model, and you can do the very best you can in that course. To ensure that the workload for students and for your teachers is manageable by making the process as efficient as possible, but whilst being able to reach the outcomes we need, the highest grades possible, with the evidence base we need to be able to back that up. To give sufficient evidence base to be able to justify our decisions, and to allow external scrutiny. A big difference from last year, where obviously we are becoming the centres, what would have been the exam boards, but we now are having to collect and be able to produce the evidence on which we've made our grading decisions. And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about the appeals process. So back in school, teachers' subjects will continue to cover any new content, any content that's not being covered. As I say, there may be some adjustments. Some exam boards, some specifications had already made adjustments before Christmas. We're not expecting them to make more, but we do now have that level in school that we could make some adjustments and say, well, we'll cover this, as I say, but maybe not in the detail required, because actually that's not really required when you go on to next steps. A level in that particular subject, level 3 qualifications. So again, all of this is with that destinations focus. We need you to get the very best grades you possibly can, and the grades that you deserve, but we also equally need you to go on and be successful with that information, with that knowledge, next year and beyond, with further education or employment. So we want you to complete NEA where we think that that's appropriate. NEA can be marked when it's fully completed, or even part completed. But where students, for instance, are prepared and ready to do a practical in NEA, and they've wanted to do that throughout, it's the reason they pick the course, then we will facilitate that in school and make sure they get that opportunity to be able to do that, and we can use that as part of our evidence base when it comes to any grading decisions. So you've already completed cycle 1, as I said, thank you for that. You've done amazingly well with that. Cycle 2 and 3, we're expecting you to be in school, and they'll be done under controlled conditions, in school, exam conditions, but with full access arrangements. And so cycle 2 will take place week commencing the 19th of April. So we're not making any changes to that cycle 1, 2 and 3 that we've already discussed and shared. And that's the first week then after Easter. The cycle 3, the final cycle, will be the week commencing the 21st of May. And that again will be a week of assessments under those same conditions. All of those assessments will be similar in length to cycle 1. And will again use that same level of guidance. So we're not saying in May for cycle 3 that you've got to sit full exams, full exam papers. We will have assessed enough material during those 3 cycles by chunking that up, giving you that level of guidance that's been required, making any adjustments within those processes to say we won't be covering this, therefore we won't be assessing this, and allowing you the very best opportunities to show us that improvement as we move through cycles 1, 2 and 3, and providing us with the evidence on which we can make those grading decisions in the very best interest of each and every one of you. So you will complete assessment cycles 1, 2 and 3, and we will share the marks for assessment cycles 1 and 2 with you and your parents and carers. We'll give you the raw marks and we'll give you the average for that particular paper. We'll give you feedback. We want you to improve, and it's really important that this process that you continue to learn, continue to improve and demonstrate that improvement, which again allows us as part of that evidence base to be able to make that final grading decision. So once completed, teachers will mark that final assessment cycle. They'll continue, as they have been doing with this, to moderate those judgments, those marking judgments, and be able to make sure that we are consistent in our marking across the school. We'll then consider these as part of that wider evidence base. We'll consider them as trial examinations, not terminal examinations. We know that students historically perform better in the final exams than they do perhaps in trials. So we'll take that into account, and we'll look at that uplift that we would normally see. So it won't be as simple as saying that's the grade boundary for those particular questions that'll be taken from different exam series, and therefore that's your grade. It will be more complicated than that. We'll look to find those and how you perform over the 3, and allow that kind of uplift that we would normally see from trials up until the real thing. We'll also consider all other work that we believe demonstrates your ability. So there is flexibility within the guidance, and anything you've produced that we can look at and assess that at GCSE or BTEC standard, then we'll do that. We'll use that if that shows us a strong evidence base for a particular grade. And as a centre, we will then submit, as it says, the highest grades we possibly can based on the evidence that we have. And we will need to be able to produce that. Routinely, the exam boards may come to look at that anyway, and then as we'll come on to perhaps later on, it may also be produced in any potential appeals process. So other points, malpractice, which we've already mentioned before we started assessment cycle 1. That may be when the work appears not to be that of the student in question. The work may be well out of line with that particular typical performance of that student. That may be something that we then dig into, we ask some questions, and we check that's valid, and then we can use that. If not, we can't. When students or parents or carers try to influence the centre's decision-making process. It's a tricky one in some ways to explain this. We want you obviously to continue to talk to us about how do I improve, how do I get better in maths, how do I get better in English, in science, in history, whatever it may be. But what we're not allowed to do is engage in any specific grading conversations. So asking, what grade do you think I'll get? What will be the grade I've got for this particular piece of work? What is the grade for this? Is not something we can engage in. And that's both with students and with parents and carers. Now, if that continued, if we felt that there was undue pressure there to influence that, we would have to report that under regulations to the exam boards. Now, we were the examining authority last year. We made grading decisions, and I can absolutely assure you that there was not one example of anyone reporting to me as head of centre that there was any such influence. So let alone me having to report anything to the exam boards. And I expect it to be exactly the same this year, but we do have to just point that out so that everyone is clear. We cannot therefore engage and give any information about the grades that we do submit once they're submitted. The only way then is on publication on results day, which is the 12th of August, when you will have those grades. Any specific grading questions, more broad stroke about things, not particular grading for your child, but or for you yourself, anything that you want to know, if that comes to exams at bradfield.sheffield.school.uk, that's the way in which we will respond and answer those queries. So there is then an appeals process, and a two-stage appeals process this year. So firstly, if you felt that there was an administrative error, you could ask for us, the centre, to check that the grade that you've been awarded was the grade that the school submitted. The centre, the school, would be able to quickly check that and ascertain is that the grade, and we would let you know. The second type of appeal is where you feel that that grading judgment is not the correct judgment, the correct judgment has not been reached. So we will obviously be looking at that broad range, which will include assessment cycles 1, 2 and 3, those chunked trial assessments, but also wider, the NEA, any other work that you may have produced that we feel gives us a stronger evidence base for your particular grade. If you want to appeal against that final grade, you have that right. We will then submit all of the evidence that we have gathered and our decision-making process and our grade that they know will go to the exam board, and someone at the exam board will look at that evidence and assess whether that grading decision is correct. Now, what they may do is they may say that that grade is correct and it would stay the same. They may feel that the grade should be higher given the evidence that they've seen. They may also feel that the centre has been over generous and that the grade may go down. So just like any standard year of review of marking, there is that caveat that grades can go up and down. So it would be something that would need to be considered under those grounds. But as I say, we will be doing the very best we can and making our decisions in the very best favour we can, but only based on the evidence that we have and can produce for that or other purposes. When the exam boards can routinely come anyway as part of the guidance, it suggests come and check the general grading within our school and sample some of those grades and sample some of the evidence on which they're based. So it has to be absolutely robust and something that we can use in that way. So finally, a summary which we can share. Working out your grade, it will be teacher judgment. It will not be an algorithm. They'll not be adjusted by computer. We do want you to continue to work. You know, we can continue to assess you through those upcoming assessment cycles or through other work that you may produce, NEA and other work you may produce in the meantime. You'll only be assessed on what you've been taught, and we will share with you, like with this presentation, the evidence base on which we are making those grading decisions. Mocks, tests and work already done can be used as part of that, which is why we're going for that use of cycle 1, 2 and 3, chunking that up rather than replacing it with big exams at the end. Continue with non-exam assessments, and that can be used whether it's completed or partly completed. As you know, art and design will be based only on the portfolio which you are working on. We can use those extra questions that may become available, and we may use those in some part during assessment cycle 3. It is based on work you've already completed and the work you're going to do in future, so do keep going. You can still make a difference to your grade. Gcse Results Day is the 12th of August. As I say, that final week of assessments begins the 17th of May, so you will be looking to complete those on the 21st of May, so please don't book anything should you wish before that date. As it says there, if you're unhappy, you can appeal, and I've gone through that process, and it tells you there further information on the .gov website /Ofqual. I hope that's useful. Do keep working with us. You've done amazing, and it will be absolutely fantastic to continue that work when you return to us shortly. We really can't wait to see you in person and to start those last few weeks and getting you into the very best position we can for not just the grading purposes, but more importantly for you to go on and be successful both now and in future. So thank you very much, and we will see you soon.